10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we are live. This is Andrew Bryant coming to you live in this time of social upheaval. We are all of us experiencing the challenge of the COVID-19, and wherever you are in the world, the people that I've been talking to have been either succeeding in managing themselves or are struggling and are stressed. So it is with great pleasure that I invite to the live today good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Tanvi Gautam. Before you speak, let me just tell you about Tanvi. She is an award-winning speaker and coach. She is on the Change Makers list by Workforce Magazine. And really, in a time of change, I can think of nobody better to have on this live and discuss the challenges we're having right now with social distancing. Tanvi, welcome. What's your take on this?
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. You're right. This is such an important topic for us to be talking about right now, because I think there is a lot of anxiety that is surrounding the event. And, we are no longer isolated. We are all interconnected and interdependent. Whether we have dealt with it differently in Singapore, we are still picking up on anxieties of what's happening in Italy. We are still seeing things unfolding in Spain, and all of it is having an impact on us. So talking about social distancing, I think that there is a deeper aspect of social distancing that we are not talking about, which is the real opportunity of this term, right? A lot of us are thinking of social distancing as, okay, keep 4 meters away from me or 5 feet away from me, or whatever is the way you've defined it. But I think the real challenge of this concept of social distancing is not physical distancing, it's psychological distancing. The distance we are feeling now that we are not in the same room, when we are not seeing each other every day, when we have lost community all of a sudden. And I think that is the real opportunity for us to discuss in this crisis. And, the other day when we were talking about this, you were sharing with me about the work that you have been seeing on the DSM-5 and how that feeds into the whole psychological distance that we really need to talk about. And I was wanting you to dive into that a little bit deeper before I can share some of my own strategies, because I think that's going to be very helpful.
Okay. Well, the DSM-5, for those that don't know, is the handbook for psychiatrists. And it's kind of once upon a time, it would be a way, how you go into a shop and you kind of match paint colors. Well, in the early days, psychiatrists, had difficulty in diagnosing, so they had lists of symptoms, and if you matched that list of symptoms, then that was your diagnosis. So the DSM-5 is the latest one of those, and the big pivot of the DSM-5 is it looks at mental health in terms of a spectrum, like a standard deviation. So we're all, to some extent, on a spectrum, right? When we talk about kids on a spectrum, we're talking about them at the end of a spectrum. But we're all, to some extent, a little bit sane, unsane at any one time. And an obvious spectrum, of course, is extroversion to introversion, right? Now, typically, it would be the introverts that would be suffering in a corporate environment. In fact, right now, with social distancing, the introverts could be saying, hey, I've been preparing this for my entire life. It's the extroverts that might be suffering.
I have to say, there has to be a shout out at this point in time to all the introverts married to the extroverts, and no points in guessing where the story is coming from. But it is a real challenge, this trying to work from home and dealing with people who are completely different in their approach. Yep. Is a conversation of social distancing and psychological proximity that we need to talk about. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Absolutely. So when it comes to what's the normal scope, is that normal human beings, when we communicate, extrovert or introvert, have some level of concern for other people, right? If you were so extreme on that standard deviation, not just an introvert, but you were completely detached. And when I work with leaders, I run a normal personality test, and I run what's known as a limits test, which looks at those DSM-5 ends. Is the person I'm coaching, likely to have antagonism and move towards narcissism? But on the social distance side, are they detached, which means avoiding others, maintaining interpersonal distance, disinterested in other people or building relationships, completely lacking affection, and feeling dejected or glum. So if a leader is detached, they're going to be ineffective, because followers need to know that you have some empathy for them. And we're seeing in the world today those leaders who stepped up and had empathy for people who are going to be challenged in terms of their business and their salaries and their health, and those that are completely detached from that. And within organizations, we're going to see leaders that step up and show genuine empathy for their people, and maintain a psychological distance, and don't compound that with a physical distance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say, which is I think the point of this conversation, is that crisis or not, the concept of creating psychological proximity with our people is an important challenge of leadership in our times. I was just sharing with someone. They said, "Oh, our generation has never faced something like this before." I said, "I can promise you." And I hate to be the bearer of such news, but this is not the last time we are going to be encountering something like this. So I actually want everybody to think of this as an opportunity for us to prepare ourselves and reflect a little bit on where we are in terms of our preparedness. Our children are watching us. They're seeing how we are responding to this crisis. I mean, I'm spending time with my son, talking to him about showing him what's happening in Italy. It's a great opportunity for us to build future leaders who have that sense of empathy, not just about, I have got my supplies at home, and so to hell with the rest of the world. But, we are being watched. We are being watched by our kids. We are being watched by the people we are supposed to be leading. I was being, introduced I was doing a keynote for one of my clients last week. It was one of those virtual in-person kind of things. And the person who was supposed to introduce me was a very senior leader. And she had a really bad cough. And she decided at the last minute that she would not go on air because of the anxiety it would create. Even though it was a normal cough, it wasn't like one of those virus things. And I said, that's really important, because how you are coming across and framing the narrative for people around you really matters in this time. Do they feel that they're a community? Are they coming together? You don't want to heighten their anxiety knowingly or unknowingly. And so I think the big opportunity in all of this also is something you talk about a lot, Andrew, is self-regulation. Mm-hmm. People really need to self-regulate, whether they are in the grocery store, or they are, at the beach, or they are in the restaurant, or they're in the meeting room. Self-regulation is in the need of the hour at the moment, I would say.
Sure. And self-regulation or self-management or personal mastery is always driven by self-awareness. And we as human beings have this ability to monitor how we're feeling. So, if you wake up in the morning and you drank too much the night before, you're aware that, you're not operating at your most sharp. I think that's a reasonable, general experience that most people have had that have tried alcohol and probably overdone it. And sometimes even just taking medication, sometimes just taking anti-inflammatories or other kinds of painkillers, you'll notice, I feel like I'm operating in a little bit of a fog. And you get this sense of, this isn't me in the best state. As we're stressed, as we're spending time with our families, etc., aware that we're not doing our normal routine, some self-awareness of, well, how am I feeling? Am I taking this out on my spouse or on my kids? Am I suddenly a little bit more aggressive or a shorter fuse? And so the self-awareness, then the self-regulation. What do I need to do for that? Do I need to go and, I can't go to my gym perhaps. Do I need to go to the bedroom and go do some push-ups? Or, do I need to do some other stress management? Do I need to meditate or go in the garden and breathe, or on the balcony and breathe? So the self-regulation, being aware that we need to stop touching our faces and stop shaking hands and maintain the business, wash our hands. I came in last night from going out, and 10 minutes in, I went, oh my God, I didn't wash my hands as soon as I entered the house. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't do it. All right. And so developing those new habits starts with the self-awareness, then the self-regulation or the self-management, so that becomes a habit. there's one habit I just wanted to talk about very quickly. You and I have a great relationship on video, right? We connect and collaborate through this medium. And whenever we start a conversation, before we get into the nitty gritty of what we're discussing, we check in with each other how we are.
Yes.
Right? And because we have that relationship, that friendship, we genuinely care. How are you doing? What's happening for you? And, if I say, I'm not great, but let's get into the business, you won't let me get into the business until you know I'm okay, and vice versa.
Yeah, because here's the thing, Andrew. Ignoring emotional states of people does not make it go away. Let's just be very clear about that. You think you're gonna, push it under the carpet or whatever else and get on with it. It's not. And I think the times that we are passing through, the dexterity that leaders show in managing the emotions of people is as important as the dexterity they show in managing the operations or the bottom line or the rest of it. This is the real test that will separate the men from the boys, the women from the girls, and the leaders from the pretending leaders, if I might say, is, are you able to lead from a 360 perspective and not just, let's get to business?
Very good. I was on a call this morning to New York, and a leader of a pharmaceutical company, and he's engaged me to do some group coaching for his team because he's genuinely genuinely concerned on how they're doing. And I was comparing his leadership with transactional leadership. He was being a very transformational leader, worrying about his people, and he's got people in Brazil and Buenos Aires and New York and Dubai and Singapore, and he's going like, now we need to time this so that we get everybody. And I want to, I never put a call between 6 and 9 p.m. for people because I want them to be able to put their kids to bed. And I went, wow, this guy really has that empathy for his people, which is really great.
Well, I reminded you of that, didn't I, Andrew, when we are about to talk about something that we want to share with the community on timing, on dinner timing and people being put to bed. But yeah, you need to think about these things. Everybody is not in the same time zone. And, it's that little bit of care that goes a long way.
Which brings me to another point that you and I discussed, is that we can talk to this because you and I have the experience of being physically distanced from our audience, because we both step on stages, and the audience is in this case, our audience is via video, but when our audience, we're on a platform and the audience is down below, there's a physical distance there too. And anybody who's spoken on a stage knows what we're talking about. How do you handle that?
It's such a great question, because I think there is that social distance, even when we were normally on conference calls before, this whole thing blew up. And then, you're standing on stage, you've got all those lights focused on you. You can sometimes not even see the audience. And at the same time, your ability to get your message across is so heavily dependent on, being able to create that psychological safety and psychological proximity with your audience. And I think one of the things that I have found very helpful when I'm working with leaders on how to bridge social distancing, whether it's from stage or whether they are in their pitches or even high stakes conversations, is to always begin at the same point, which is by asking, what's the narrative in the head of the audience? That's always the point to begin, because that's the point of empathy. That's the point of walking in their shoes. And there are 3 questions that I ask leaders to think about before they speak, so that they can close the social distance, they can create that psychological connection, is, what does the audience think of me? Because many times the audience may have a preconceived notion about who you are or what you bring to the table. So I'll give you an example. The other day I was speaking at a European bank. I was doing a keynote, and I decided to wear a sari. And it was the first time I wore a sari to a keynote. And I had to ask the audience, I said, how many of you, and it's a mixed global audience, I said, how many of you have had a keynote being given by a woman in a sari? And there was not a single hand that went up in the room. And I did it purposely because I know that sometimes unconscious biases creep into the way people perceive others who are speaking, be that gender, age, ethnicity, even background. You happen to be from HR. What can you tell me about what I need to understand? Or you happen to be from finance. Do you really get what marketing does here? So, question number one, what's the narrative in the head of the audience about you? Second question is, what's the narrative in the head about the message I'm about to give? Do they have preconceived notions? And the third is, what's going to come in the way of the audience actually taking action? Do they have the resources? Do they have the mindset, the skill set? Very often leaders will go and announce, I want my team to do this. But the question leaders really need to ask is, what can I do to make your job easier? And when a leader asks that question, what can I do to make your job easier? You're again coming from a place of empathy. You're reducing the social distance. It's not about the hierarchy anymore. It's about what can we do with each other to reach our goals. And I think those are some of the ways in which, by using storytelling, I have, and the leaders I work with, reduce the space between them and their audiences.
Storytelling is so important, which is why when you and I put a program together, we made sure we included storytelling as part of the visibility and the vision and the voice that the women need to step up into a leadership position.
Yeah, I just realized we've been alluding to the program, but we haven't told them anything about the program. So maybe this is a good time for you to tell them, what is this program, where is it happening, how long is it, and how can they join?
Sure. Well, this is putting the fish on the table. So, that's a metaphor rather than a narrative. Sometimes metaphors are enough. You mentioned as you step in front of the audience, you're saying, what's the narrative? Well, putting the fish on the table. If we put the fish on the table, we can cook that fish and we can eat it. If we leave it underneath the table, it's going to stink, right? So getting our message out there. So Tanvi and I have previously collaborated in doing women in leadership programs. So men, pause for a moment. Don't switch off just yet. There's something for you. But for the women in your life, for the women who are watching this, Tanvi and I have decided to take a collaboration of women in leadership programs, put it online in a 3-month coaching program. And we've opened up registrations for that. In fact, there's a link in the comments here. It's selfleadership.com/amplify. Amplify is the name of the program, to amplify your voice, vision, and visibility. So if you're a leader wanting to be a leader, if you're a woman who wants to be a leader, this is the program for you. Gentlemen, I have other programs for you. Don't worry about that. But Tanvi, expand a little bit about what was our thinking in developing this program.
Yeah, just really quickly, it's actually a 6 weeks online program. The 3-month program that Andrew was talking about is the more expansive men and women program. So this particular program, Amplify, is 6 weeks. It's online, which means you can join from anywhere. And we will be looking at a few different aspects of what is the skill set and mindset you need to own your voice, to understand what is the vision that you want to bring to life, and how can you amplify that, be that in one-on-one conversations. So there is a segment around executive presence that Andrew is going to be leading. How do you do it when you have to have conversations of, introducing change in your organizations, or getting your clients to come along on a change journey, or in sales pitches, etc., which is why I will be leading a session around storytelling, which is something that I really enjoy doing. And the third segment has got to do with being a more effective and powerful speaker, which we shall be co-creating. And what I love most about this program is that I think Andrew and I very often come at the same issue from slightly different angles. So it is going to be that much richer, where the women will get both the yin and the yang perspective of, how to amplify their presence and their voices and their messages within the organizations and in the larger ecosystem. So we're starting on April 8th, which there isn't too much time.
Is it 8th or 18th?
8th, Andrew, from what I remember.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's why I've got you on board, right? So the yin of the details, right? So
well, I don't always get it right, but sometimes I do. Today is one of those days. And so, there are many things going on in the world right now that we have no control over. And then there are some things that we do have control over. And I think Andrew and I are looking at this space as one of those pockets that we do have control over, because here's the thing, the crisis will not last forever. And the first people who will be through that door once the crisis is over are the ones who self regulated themselves emotionally, physically, mentally, as well as got prepared for what might come next. And so give yourself this opportunity to step into a space that can make a huge difference, not just in your life, but the life of the people that you're being called upon to lead.
Awesome. Beautiful. So in summary, our conversation today started with social distance, and we've moved from social intelligence to social intelligence. I think we need to be socially intelligent in this time. And as you said, those that are intelligent and take action will be the ones that survive and grow through this process. So thank you, Dr. Tanvi Gautam, my good friend Tanvi. Lovely to chat with you. And for those watching, stay tuned. We'll be coming to you with timely messages on the real world issues here through Facebook, LinkedIn, and our various social media channels. So thanks, Tanvi. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.